So hello, everybody. My name is Mary Salas Fricke, and I am your presenter today from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's Office of Spill Prevention and Response. OSPR, I'm going to use the acronym. It's a program within Fish and Wildlife, and my part of the presentation is an overview of the program. We will have a question and answer session after my presentation, and my coworkers, Kathleen Jennings, who is our Environmental Response Branch Chief, my coworkers, Kathleen Jennings, who is our Environmental Response Branch Chief, will be available for questions, as well as our Senior Environmental Scientist, Rachel Fabian. I'm going to ask the participants to hold your questions till the end of my presentation on the OSPR overview. And I'll be using some acronyms from time to time, one of them being I'll use AB for Assembly Bill, SB for Senate Bill, and CDFW for the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. So a little bit about myself. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Radio, Television, Film Production with a double major in Spanish language and culture from Baylor University, and I became a Spanish language public information officer in 2007 at the Air Resources Board. I came to OSPR in 2011 as an information officer, and as you can see, I participated in several spills and numerous statewide drills. So what led to the start or the beginning of OSPR? And it all began with the training vessel Exxon Valdez, an oil tanker owned by the Exxon Shipping Company that spilled 11 million gallons of crude oil into Alaska's Prince William Sound on March 24, 1989. It was the worst oil spill in U.S. history at that time. Then, in 1990, another devastating oil spill occurred off Huntington Beach from the trading vessel American Trader, discharging some 416,000 gallons of crude oil. Both of these devastating incidents led to the comprehensive legislation called the Lempert-Keene-Seastrom Oil Spill and Prevention Act, enacted into law in September of 1990. Covering all aspects of marine oil spill prevention and response in California. 1 month later, our federal government created legislation called the Federal Oil Pollution Act, or what they call OPA 90, in October of 1990. OPA 90 was created to lay out penalties for companies responsible. Here we go. The OPA 90 was created to lay out penalties for companies responsible for oil spills, as well as to establish more detailed guidelines on what needs to be done if a spill occurs. Let's see. In response to the Lac Mégantic Canadian train accident on July 6, 2013, in which rail cars carrying Bakken oil collided, creating an explosion, literally wiping out a large section of downtown Lac Mégantic, leading to the passage of California's SB 861 in June of 2014. Okay. Yeah. All right, I think I'm on the right slide still. All right, then this bill, SB 861, expanded OSPR's prevention and response authority to include all waters of the state. OSPR's authority to respond to oil spills brought a robust marine program to include California's inland lakes and streams. Finally, the recent passage of AB 148, just in October of 2021, expands the meaning of oil to include renewable fuels. So let's focus on the state act. This act, or the Lempert-Keene-Seastrom Oil Spill Prevention and Response Act, it created the Office of Spill Prevention and Response, and it's a program within DFG that started on January 1 of 1991, back then when we were called DFG. Wrong slide. Okay. California is the only state in the nation to have oil spill prevention activities combined with a state agency responsible for natural resource protection. OSPR is a lead agency tasked with oil spill response and enforcement, as well as a natural resource trustee. Now, our administrator is the Chief Deputy Director for the Department of Fish and Wildlife because the legislature wanted the administrator to be able to utilize the department's resources in performing his or her duties, and also to provide the administrator with the public trust authority to manage and conserve state fish and wildlife resources. The administrator has primary authority to direct oil spill cleanup and the authority over the use of all response methods in waters of the state. Currently, our administrator is Tom Cullen. Now, OSPR has two funds, and these two funds I'm going to be talking about. One of them, the first one, the Oil Spill Prevention and Administration Fund, or the OSPAF. That one, this fund originally came from a fee of 6.5 cents per barrel on crude oil and petroleum products received at marine terminals and refineries in the state. Now, this fee increased recently to 8.5 cents per barrel with the passage of AB 148. The OSPAF that we give the acronym for this particular fund is also supported by a fee on non-take vessels. Those are vessels of 300 gross tons or more that do not carry oil as cargo. This fund supports the day-to-day operations of the OSPR program, as well as the Oiled Wildlife Care Network. And that is a program based in at the University of California, Davis for recovering and rehabilitating oiled wildlife. The OSPAF Fund also supports oil spill prevention programs within the State Lands Commission. Okay, so a little bit about the Oil Spill Response Trust Fund. That fund is used by OSPR to fund response activities in the event of an oil spill that impacts state waters, or in the event of an imminent threat of an oil spill. So by law, the responsible party, that's the party that's carrying the oil or has ownership of the oil, is liable for response costs and other spill-related expenditures from the fund. In 1991, this fund reserve was created through the collection of a 25 cents per barrel fee on crude oil and petroleum products received at California marine terminals from a point of origin outside of California. It currently has a cap of $55 million, and the additional $55 million in the form of financial security should there be an extremely significant oil spill or when no responsible party exists or the responsible party is unable to pay. So a little bit about OSPR's jurisdiction for oil spill incidences since its inception was on petroleum-based product releases, but with the passage of Assembly Bill 148 in October of this year, oil includes renewable fuels such as biodiesel, renewable diesel, ethanol or E95, and sustainable aviation fuel. So OSPR's mission, its mission is to provide the best achievable protection of California's natural resources by preventing, preparing for, and responding to spills of oil and other deleterious materials and through restoring and enhancing affected resources. OSPR continually works to identify and facilitate the use of best achievable protection in several categories: prevention and mitigation, mechanical response, applied response technologies, and remote sensing. Now I want to talk to you about OSPR's 4 mission areas: prevention, preparedness, response, and restoration. So I want to talk about OSPR's prevention activities. The first 3, the harbor safety committees, vessel traffic services, and tug escorts, those are all marine activities that involve the marine environment. There's also, on the prevention side of the house at OSPR, we have monitoring and inspections. We also work with the railroads, pipeline companies, and production facilities to utilize best practices on preventing oil spills. So let's talk a little bit about preparedness. On the preparedness side of the house at OSPR, they have what we call the area contingency plans, or the ACPs, and these response plans exist in the marine, or for the marine environment. The U.S. Coast Guard and the Office of Spill Prevention and Response agreed to a joint preparation of 6 contingency plans through co-chairing 3 port area committees for contingency planning. And they are the USCG, or the Coast Guard port areas, for number 1, San Francisco, 2, Los Angeles, Long Beach, and number 3, San Diego. Geographic response plans, that's the next bullet on the slide, are plans for oil spills that occur in inland California. Now, these plans are being updated and developed by OSPR staff in conjunction with other federal, state, local government, industry, and other partners for priority inland waters of the state with a higher risk of an oil spill. These are areas such as key lakes and rivers in California. Okay, so drills and exercises. OSPR tests the response readiness of vessels, production facilities, and refinery facility plan holders by engaging in the design of oil spill exercises. And we also are tasked with conducting these individual exercises and evaluating them. Next bullet is the rating of oil spill response organizations, or for short, we call them OSROs. So these OSROs play an integral part in OSPR's planned response to any spill incident. OSPR has OSROs on contract, and each OSRO has been evaluated through OSPR's unannounced drill program. Those are really interesting. I've actually attended one. The unannounced drill tests an OSRO's rapid response to a variety of oil spill incidents. So the final bullet is the Certificates of Financial Responsibility, and for short, we call them Cofers. This application for a Cofer shows proof of financial responsibility to pay for cleanup of oil spills and damage for tankers and barges that transport oil in bulk across state marine waters. Now, non-take vessels, those are 300 gross tons or greater, which carry oil as fuel, and facilities located where, so the for the non-tank vessels of 300 gross tons or greater, and facilities located where a spill could impact waters of the state, that's where these barges, large barges and container ships must carry certificates of financial responsibility. And that could include cruise ships too, yachts, anything when we're talking about a non-tank vessel, that's any vessel that's 300 gross tons or greater that has fuel on board, and it's not, that fuel is not considered anything that like transporting oil in bulk. So a little more about drills and exercises. OSPR is tasked with oil spill drills with industry, overseeing equipment deployment drills and tabletop exercises. OSPR's drills and exercise staff also conduct unannounced drills and sensitive site areas. This is a picture of a sensitive site area near Eureka. So these types of exercises for around sensitive sites, it's usually to test the effectiveness of booming strategies, and boom is how we're able to collect the spilled oil and then skim the oil off the water from barges. And so getting back to the sensitive site exercises, they usually test the effectiveness of booming strategies in the marine environment, and that's by legislation. So a little more information on Cofers, or certificates of financial responsibility. So again, a Cofer, it's proof of adequate financial responsibility for vessels and facility owner operators to pay cleanup and damage costs arising from an oil spill. Listed on this slide are required coverage amounts for tank vessels. These are vessels that carry oil as cargo, hence the $1 billion Cofer requirement. Non-tank vessels are ones that, again, they carry oil as fuel, and they need to file for a Cofer for at least 300 million. And those Cofers can vary depending on how much oil you're carrying on your particular vessel. And now I want to talk to you about the response side of the house. We have a field response team, and those teams, they're sprinkled throughout California. And the response team consists of a wildlife officer, an environmental scientist, and an oil spill prevention specialist. This team follows the incident command structure, and the incident command structure is a framework that we report up to and make decisions, and usually the incident commander is a wildlife officer. On the response side of the house too are OSPR laboratories, the first one being the Water Pollution Control Laboratory. The next one I want to mention is our Petroleum Chemistry Laboratory that fingerprints oil. They can tell where it's from, who carried it, etc. There's also the Aquatic Bioassessment Laboratory and the Marine Pollution Studies Laboratory. OSPR also works closely with the Oiled Wildlife Care Network. Again, I mentioned it's part of the UC Davis system. So a little more information on the Oiled Wildlife Care Network. There are 40 plus wildlife care member organizations spread throughout the state. And they're concentrated in the coastal areas because that's where it originally started. Before we got the statewide orders. So OWCN for short was established by DFG, as we were known at the time, OSPR through California legislation in 1993. The primary mission of OWCN is to ensure that wildlife exposed to petroleum products in the environment receive the best achievable treatment by providing access to permanent wildlife rehabilitation. Facilities and trained personnel maintain a constant state of readiness with the OWCN for oil spill response. OWCN facilities rely heavily on volunteers. So all volunteers handling oil wildlife must have hazardous materials trainings, or the same that we all have if you're a responder out in the field. You've got to know, you have to have knowledge and renew your knowledge every year on hazardous materials training, or what we call HAZWOPR. OWCN also supports continued research on improved care of oiled wildlife. Okay, so now we're on the fourth bullet here for OSPR activities. We have, a lot of our who we work with on a spill, they're there, like particularly like the Coast Guard, they're there from the beginning of the response to the end of the response. But then once the cleanup has been complete, our team of natural resource damage assessment scientists are there to oversee the natural resources that they're returned to. They return the injured natural resources to pre-spill condition. And they also focus on the compensation for interim losses through the restoration, rehabilitation, and replacement or acquisition. So now we're at the good part, the questions.
Hey, Kathleen, could you give us an introduction to yourself and helpful for our beach managers?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kathleen Jennings, and I'm the Environmental Response Branch Chief for OSPR. I think hearing what I heard of your group, our strongest nexus with the type of work that this group does is in assessing the safety of shorelines, and in our case, that's during an oil spill, not year-round like the programs that are presented here today. We had a recent spill in Southern California, as many of you are aware, and one of the primary concerns was for the safety of beachgoers and making determination about what levels of contaminants in beach sediments and water were considered safe. And just like some of the programs that were described, there are inconsistencies and discrepancies with how that information is gathered and analyzed and distributed. And we tested a new function in the incident command system for an oil spill response called the Public Health Assessment Unit. And there were actually a few people in this group of participants that were engaged with that. The water boards, the county CUPAs, and it was the first time that we were able to be organized about how public health threats from oil spills are assessed. Sometimes they're managed through a safety unit, sometimes through an environmental unit, but this was a dedicated unit for public health assessment. And it seemed to work out pretty well, and it's something that we're going to continue in California. And if there are any questions to that, I can try to address them.
Oh, I also wanted to mention that we have Rachel Fabian on the line too. She's a senior environmental scientist with OSPR. She's also available to answer questions as well.
Thank you for joining us, Rachel.
Hi, thank you.
Doesn't seem like we have many questions for you this morning.
Well, you're always feel free to reach out to Kathleen and me. My day job is coordinating spill management team certification programs, but I have been working on the public health assessment unit with Kathleen for the last few years, and we sort of stood up our successful grand experiment at the last spill. So, if folks think of questions later, feel free to reach out.
And we can provide our contact information to you for any follow-up questions